a part of me is just dying to show it to the world because we had so much fun making it and we know it's going to be a big hit. So it's just like a matter of getting there and getting to the day.
When you first got involved in this, what was it that interested you most about Shang-Chi as a character? You know, he's somebody that people, you know, may not necessarily be familiar with from the comics, but what was it about him that you found most intriguing?
You know what, Devin? When you look at the character of Shang-Chi through the comic books, you know, especially Marvel's comic books, you know, going back to the 70s and the 80s, right. I mean, you know, the fact that he existed and the fact that he was an Asian character, it was amazing. But at the same time, you know, there are aspects of that portrayal of him that maybe could feel a little stereotypical. And so I think when we kind of first started to map out what, like, who this character was and what their journey was going to be over the course of this film, you know, I think we were all very sensitive to not have it go into sort of stereotypical territory. His backstory isn't, you know, has never been told before. So we're kind of telling an origin story for the first time that audiences haven't seen. So, you know, we know, you know, so many different versions of Batman's origin story, you know, how his parents were, you know, murdered when he was very young. We know Peter Parker is who's bitten by a radioactive spider and he lost, you know, he loses his uncle really early on. Well, Shang-Chi's story is, like you said, is very much unknown to most of the world. So I think we had kind of a lot of freedom and creative liberty to make it kind of the way that we wanted to.
Yeah. And you know, from talking to Kevin Feige and Jonathan Schwartz, you know, I know that this is really a family story. You know, it's centering on Shang-Chi and his relationship with his father. You know, what was it about that, you know, that family relationship and that father-son dynamic that you found really interesting?
Well, I definitely thought the father-son dynamic was very interesting and there was a lot of places to go with it. You know, in exploring, you know, Shang-Chi's relationship with Wenwu, it really reminded me of my own relationship with my father. And really what it is about at the end of the day is a son's struggle to live up to the expectations of his father. And, you know, I don't even want to say like as an immigrant, I feel like everybody everywhere knows what that feels like. You know, it's such a universal feeling. I always find that, you know, regardless of whether you're shooting a Marvel movie or, you know, a big summer blockbuster or whatever have you, it's always, the story is always the strongest when it's grounded in a really human place. And part of what makes Destin such a special filmmaker is his willingness to go there and to explore kind of small, intimate moments, you know, as well as all of the Marvel spectacle, which of course you're going to get.
What do you think it is that makes Shang-Chi different from some of the Marvel heroes we've seen in the past?
I can say this, all right. Shang-Chi does not have a suit of armor that he puts on. He doesn't have a mask that, you know, conveniently, you know, makes him faceless and then you can replace him with CGI or anything like that. Shang-Chi is like what you see is what you get. And it's his face or my face all the time. So, you know, when mapping out our action sequences, our big fights, there's really nothing to hide behind. So it had to, you know, it had to be as much of me as physically possible.
Tell me a little bit about sort of like the stunt training process and like, did you pick up any new skills?
I think I picked up a ton of new skills that I've since maybe forgotten. I don't want to say that. I mean, I think they're in there somewhere, but really when we started, I mean, it was like 6 months from the, you know, the day that I was cast to the day that we rolled cameras, almost exactly. And basically from the moment I flew back from Comic-Con, I was like, we got to hit the ground running. We got to go. And so I trained, you know, out of gyms in Toronto, in LA, and then, you know, in Sydney, once we got down there to do our photography. We had an amazing stunt team that, you know, we assembled from, you know, the far reaches of the world. Like we had, you know, Australians, we had, you know, a Chinese stunt team from America, Canada. I mean, just everyone was so incredibly talented at what they did. And, you know, they all just came together. And so I would have like, you know, 3 weeks where I would train only Tai Chi, and then 3 weeks where I would train Wushu or, you know, other different types of Chinese martial arts. And it was really incredible just getting into the feel of each different style, because they really are, it's almost like a dance in a way. The feeling and the emotion behind it is so different. So it's just like a lot of days working like 4 or 5 hours a day, fight choreography, training, movement, flexibility. You know, I had a team of people whose job it was literally just to like rip my legs apart little by little, because that's like the true mark of a martial artist that's in practice, right? Is the flexibility.
When you think back on like the last year and a half, like since Comic-Con, like what's that like? Has it sunk in the fat, or like was there anything about becoming a superhero that you weren't expecting, or that really surprised you?
I mean, honestly, when I look back to the last year and a half, it's like, that incredible moment in my life has kind of been overshadowed by everything that's going on now with the pandemic.
Fair.
I mean, I couldn't have imagined, when I was walking on stage at Comic-Con, that would be like the last time I would be at Comic-Con. I thought for sure I would have come back in 2020, would have been able to, show everybody some footage and all of that. And it just seems like, the world has just taken us in a very, very different direction, which is, unfortunate. And I know that there's, because of it, there's, a lot of people all around the world that are suffering. And so it's just like, for me, it's been an interesting few, months where I've had to, embrace all of the aspects of being a Marvel superhero. And yes, it was an incredible experience to shoot, but also, it's given me this incredible platform through which I can talk about issues that really matter. So in the beginning of the pandemic, it was, talking about the importance of wearing a mask and the importance of, everybody kind of doing their part to get through this. And then, in the last couple of months too, it's been actually, the whole way through, it's been talking about this rise in, anti-Asian hate and prejudice that's kind of unfortunately come about in the wake of COVID-19, and being kind of as outspoken about that as possible. So, in a nutshell, like some really incredible moments being a superhero, trying on the suit for the first time, all of the fun things. But then also, something I take really seriously is making sure that once you do have a platform, that you use it for a good reason, and you use it to spread positivity, and you try to affect positive change.
Yeah, and I know last time we talked a lot about how, the sort of the responsibility of this movie, with having an all Asian cast and having, an Asian filmmaking team, and how important that is. And, I know you talked about how, you guys are trying to sort of update some of the original comic storylines because they do veer into those, sort of offensive racial stereotypes. I mean,
Totally.
How did you want to sort of navigate that and sort of, telling the story in like a very modern, updated way?
Well, I mean, to be honest, just by virtue of there being so many, different Asian perspectives participating in the movie, I think you just, it's something that we don't even have to think about because, for myself, I was born in China and I came over to Canada when I was very young. For someone like Nora, she was born in the States, and we just have a lot of different perspectives. Some of our cast members were born in Hong Kong, or born and grew up in the mainland, and we just, I mean, the really wonderful thing about movies like this, where we have a plethora of characters that are diverse and that are rich in their own sense, is that we do have so many different perspectives, and so you get to see the kind of typical Asian American perspective and how that's very vastly different than the life of somebody who grew up in Asia. I wish I could sit here and tell you that we all kind of planned this ahead of time, and in a lot of ways we were careful, but I think it just comes as a byproduct of having more voices in the creative process, and enriching all things and everything to do with the movie.
And you mentioned, working with Nora Aquafina, who I know she plays Katie, and it sort of gets drawn into this world that she doesn't know anything about. I mean, tell me a little bit about, working with her on this.
Oh my God, Nora is such a funny and just incredible actress. And to her credit, like, ended up doing a lot of stunts on this movie. And it's funny because her reaction doing a lot of these stunts is exactly Katie's when she's looking at like a wire harness for the first time, and I'm watching her kind of process what she has to do. It was really funny because I know obviously she I don't think she's ever done a role where she's had to do that before. And I just thought she embraced it so wholeheartedly and really just like threw herself into it. And I'm so proud of her, just to be able to do that. And some of our favorite scenes and some of our favorite days of shooting on the movie is when, it's just the two of us just being ourselves and playing off of each other and riffing. And it's just like, we could shoot those scenes forever, and Destin, you know, would love it, but ultimately we'd have to move on because there's a lot of movie to shoot and a lot of it has to do with action. But honestly, it's so fun just to have somebody to bounce off of, like, comedically. And it's just, you know, those are the days where you just like collapse at the end of the day and you're just in a fit of laughter because you've just, you know, been having so much fun.
Absolutely. And we have to talk about, you know, Tony Leung as Wenwu, as playing your father.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
tell me about working with him. I mean, he's such a legend.
Just an absolute legend. I was trying to explain to some of my friends who weren't familiar with who he was, and I was like, look, you imagine Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, George Clooney combined into one person. That's who Tony Leung is in Asia. You know, he's just got such a crazy resume of iconic films, talking about, you know, Wong Kar-wai, the golden age of really Asian HK cinema in the 70s and 80s. You have Chungking Express, In the Mood for Love, and Infernal Affairs, and, you know, even going into The Grand Master. I mean, just incredible movies, and he's such an amazing actor in all of them. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty intimidating, you know, having to step on the screen with like a legend like that. But he is so incredibly kind and humble and gentle. You know, he really, like, he made me feel like he was my actual dad. You know, in a way, there's just something so nurturing about his presence. You know, he invited me to go snowboarding with him. I don't think a lot of people know this because he's, you know, I think there's a misconception because he can be so like unassuming and humble and like soft spoken. This guy is a huge adrenaline junkie. He's like, this guy loves snowboarding, like water skiing. He does everything. And, you know, it just plays into, I think, the legend of his badassery.
But I know we're going to have a photo of you in costume. I mean, what can you tell me about like the first time you tried on, you know, the costume?
It's like your consciousness leaves your body. You feel yourself, you watch yourself putting a superhero outfit on for the first time that's like been tailored to you. And you just, I mean, I just got overwhelmed with emotion, you know, and knowing how few people, you know, ever got this privilege, and not to mention people of color, not to mention, you know, Asian American, Asian Canadian people, whatever have you. It's just like, I understood kind of the gravity and the significance of that moment. And I kind of felt like, you know, it's like the Hamilton song. It's like history has its eye on you. And I really like felt like I was stepping into a piece of history.